Hi everyone, welcome to an Easter's training seminar on how to know things. Thank you for joining me. This video is one of two parts, so it'll be accompanied by a video on how to put the knowledge we talk about today into use by my good friend and co-CA Jahil. So hopefully both of these are helpful. What I want to talk about today is pretty simple. I want to first talk about the kinds of things you want to know, so sort of information you want to know or how to think about going into a competition like Easter's, whether you've done it before or you haven't, what you might want to think about. Secondly, I'll talk about the ways you might approach with your team, learning more about the world or filling in gaps about the world you might not know. And finally, I'll talk about where you might go and find that information. And hopefully this video isn't meant to be one that is scary or talking about the fact that you need to know everything about the world. None of that's true. But I do think it is one of the beautiful things of debating that forces us to come up with knowledge and ideas about various different things that we might not immediately find interesting or that we might not have had much experience to in our lives. And I think it's quite beautiful that we get this chance to challenge ourselves to learn about things outside what we would traditionally know. The first thing I want to talk about then is, in a more philosophical way, what is it that you want to know before you go into a competition like Easter's? Because you're not expected, nor is it particularly helpful, to just be a fact book that knows everything there is to know about every country or every issue. Nor are you expected to know, or to be useful to know, a little bit about every country or every issue or every book that's ever written or every piece of art that's ever produced. Nor would it be particularly helpful to know everything there is to know about one particular book or art piece or sport. What is traditionally helpful is to balance out that you have sufficient width across all the topic areas and you have enough depth to be able to make sensible arguments. And of course, that's spread across your team. So not everyone needs to have all of these things. As long as you have someone in your team who can help you out in these areas, that would be good. On the first goal, your first goal is to make sure there aren't topic areas in the debate that you're missing. So if you go back and look at previous Easter's tabs, and you can just look these up online, just Google Easter's 2025 Calico tab and so on. When you look at those, you'll observe that many of the rounds are in some way themed. So you might have 3 topics that are all about Australian politics, 3 topics that are all about sport, 3 topics that are all about religion. And go through and look at those and kind of come up with a little mental list of what each of these topic areas are. And your goal is that you would not have any topic area or any round where you didn't know about any of the topics, where that area is something that is just beyond the knowledge of many of your teams. And that's quite natural, right? Many people might have 3 members that have not been raised in religion and they don't know terribly much about religion, or they don't have experience with it. Or the same might be true for sport, or it might be true for the politics of international countries, or if you're all international students, it might be the politics of Australia. There might just be an area where you don't know anything. And that's the first goal, is you want to ensure that you have at least a rudimentary understanding of these debates. If nothing else, because it makes it less stressful to do them. It's much less scary to go into a debate knowing I at least know, the name of the leaders of the parties, or at least know what it means to be a football team and where they might be playing, or what the clubs might be. Or I at least know in this debate about art, roughly who the artists might be, right? What it might look like to be an artist, what a job as an artist might look like. You don't need to know everything, so you need to know enough not to get scared. And the second thing that I think is useful, once you've identified those topic areas, once you've done a little bit of work to make sure you're not missing anything in any topic areas, there's no topic area, no nothing, it's try and get as much depth as you can across a variety of topic areas. And what I mean by depth is that knowing basic facts, as I referred to earlier, is not terribly useful. And you'll hear more about this in Jahil's presentation. But the important point to take away here is that your goal is to predominantly is to have mechanisms rather than facts. So what you want to do is to go into a debate and be able to say, this is the way the world works. This is the way that this economic concept functions. This is why if you increase interest rates, it will decrease inflation. And not only to observe that that is a fact that you might have been taught and you might have seen in a YouTube video, but to explain why that fact is true. To explain, here are the reasons, or here's the rationale as to why if you change interest rates, it leads to a certain change in inflation. And perhaps you might also want to have sufficient depth to talk about particular parts of this process that other teams might not know. So many debates have stakeholders, they're hidden. You might imagine that art is all about the artist and the buyer, but in many cases, art is predominantly about the gallery or about the museum. We might think about the ways that things are connected, the ways that, for instance, the growth in one country's foreign exchange will change its country's economy in a way that is quite substantial, and think about the processes that might be happening behind the scenes. Or think about the rules of the world that other teams might not know. So for instance, maybe you know about the fact that Central Africa and West Africa have a currency that is tied to the euro. So any debate about the euro is also a debate about those countries. So it's about having sufficient depth to have knowledge that these things exist and to be able to spot the mechanisms. That's a really important thing we're going to talk about as we go into what you're looking at and what you're reading is you're not reading for facts per se. You're not reading to know who was the president of Ghana at a particular time or what sports team was successful in this place, etc. What you're reading is for mechanisms. You're reading for ways to know whether something is true and, more importantly, how to explain to a judge who isn't persuaded by you just saying facts at them that that thing is true. With that in mind, the question might be, how do you learn it? And the approach I will suggest is that debating should be an activity that is fun, and you should find it interesting and joyful to learn about these things in the prep season. And so I would suggest that you should find ways in your team, among your friends, among other teams maybe, or in your institution or in your city, that make this knowledge learning fun. So for instance, with my Easters team, the last time I did Easters, which was at UQ in 2024, the three of us did a PowerPoint night where we got some glasses of wine and we'd each research a particular topic area and we presented on that topic area. So I did religion, Helen did institutional investors, Josie did sport. And we learned about these topic areas and we discussed with each other and we each covered bases that none of us had previously understood. And that, I think, is really, really helpful. In terms of a more concrete method, what does that actually look like? What I want you to do is to begin, I think, by discussing with your team. So Easters is not a very long prep season. That's good. It's not meant to be a scary competition. It's not meant to be one that you spend months and months and months thinking about and preparing for. It should be fun, should be friendly for novices. And because it's a short season, you want to share the load. You don't want to have one person on a team that knows everything or feels the pressure to know everything, even if they might be quote unquote the pro, or they might be quote unquote the more experienced debater on that team. You want to make sure that everyone feels like they're involved and participating and learning that knowledge. And the way to do that is to come up with methods that work, like our PowerPoint night. I particularly like that because I found it a way to check my knowledge. So I could know a thing, but could I explain that thing using the PowerPoint to my teammates and they would understand it? If I could do that, that would suggest to me that I really understand what's going on. Again, that could be something that multiple teams work on. And when you're preparing for something like a presentation or to tell your teammates about it or to think about it or tell your dog about it or whatever, I think the process of learning depends on how elaborate you want to be. So sometimes for majors, maybe not Easters, which is fortunately always in Australia, but oftentimes you'll go to competitions in your life that might be in other countries. When you do so, kind of unfortunately, you might just need to like find every article about that country and just like compile them and make a big list of all the things you know that's happening in that country, because it could be literally anything. But more commonly, and I think for Easters, a better idea is to read a few good articles or consume a good few bits of sources about the thing you want to know, and then mentally condense it. That is, come up with a simplified explanation of the way the world works, the way that one actor interacts with another actor to produce the result that you know exists, and then come up with an example in a debate that would be helpful. So I think it's really, really good practice that once you find a mechanism that you like, imagine a debate where you would say that mechanism. Once you find an actor that you or relationship that you didn't know existed, think about ways that you could explain that in a debate. Once you watch a really good movie, because watching movies is in its own way a matter filing, when you're watching movies, you might say, that's a really interesting movie. What might it be an example for? Might it be an example of a trend in animation that is interesting, that might be a debate? Might it be an example of an approach to filmmaking or an approach to learning and talking about the human experience that I might use in a norms debate? And put the knowledge that you've gained in the context of a debate. For instance, at Australs last year, there was a motion about the Abraham Accords, which were the accords that were signed between Israel and a number of other Middle Eastern states in the period leading up to the October 7th attacks. That debate, factually, we know a lot of people Googled because they did a reverse analysis of the Google searches of the words Abraham Accords localized to the city of Guangzhou at the time, and it appears that it's spiked. That is pretty bad because it suggests that many people did not know what those were, or at least that they felt like they needed to Google them in order to come up with the answers. And it's totally fine if you don't know what the Abraham Accords were. Of course, many people will not know about many things a lot. There are many gaps in everyone's knowledge. But if you had thought, I wonder what is happening in the Middle East, I don't know what's happening in the Middle East in that period of time, what you could have done is you could have gone and read a few good articles explaining the war in the Middle East, which was fairly significant. That war clearly has causes and antecedents and a history. And you could have read those histories. And you could have said, why was it that a decision was made by Hamas to launch an attack? Why was it that a decision was made in one way or another to develop the situation to the way that it did? And those decisions would have led you to find answers that related to the immediate history of Israel and Palestine immediately prior to the war, and you would have found things about the Abraham Accords. And so maybe you wouldn't have known exactly what they were or exactly how they worked, but you've known how to relationally put them in context, the ways that you understood them as mechanisms that led to a result. And that is enough that you feel like you can at least start to make an argument, or at least start to know where the debate takes place. And it goes without saying that, even if you end up in a situation where you know nothing, which happens to all of us at various different points in our career, and even the best debaters all the time are constantly making things up, you should never Google it. Just because, as I said, you'll never be persuasive with it. Because even if you Google information, you'll never have Googled enough to know why the thing you are asserting to be true is in fact true. The last thing I want to talk about is what kind of sources you might get to learn it. And the answer, I think, to this is you want to figure out your own preferences. So many different forms of knowledge come in many different forms. And all of us, I think, have our own methods and strategies that help us understand the world in the ways that we do. One good thing, and this is terribly cringe, so I'm very sorry for saying it, is that there is a Facebook group called Debating Serious Posting, which involves lots of sort of old debaters making long posts about various minutiae of the rules. One thing I think that is very good is that people will frequently ask questions like, I wish to know more about this topic area. I wish to find more podcasts to listen to. I wish to find this and that. And lots of good-natured people will post very, very long replies in the comment section explaining the various ways they've learned about the world. And that's good. So I would advise you to join that chat if you would like and to look at things that might be helpful. But if you're not, and there's no pressure to, I think the other best sources to look at are generally the news media. There are many good and free news media sites. So the ABC in Australia, we're very fortunate to have, but also things like Al Jazeera or BBC or The Guardian or New Lines, which is a magazine about the Middle East, or The Diplomat, which is a magazine about Asia Pacific, or ACLED, which is a data research site, or for instance, Hyperlogic, which is a newspaper online I quite like about art, particularly in New York. They're all good and free. But there are also many ways to access other more expensive newspapers. So I personally really like the Financial Times. The AFR is fantastic. The Economist, the New York Times, or the London Review of Books. And those are all paid, but there are often ways to get that for free or on a discount. So for instance, your university might have a subscription. My university has a subscription to the London Review of Books. Or you might work at a place that gives a subscription. Or certain articles might have been made free online. Many accounts allow you to share gift articles with your friends. So you can, for instance, on my Financial Times account, I can give my friends 10 articles a month. So you can ask your parents or your friends whether they can share an article with you if you'd like to read it. And finally, I think it's also worth considering how to integrate methods of gaining knowledge into your routine. And this can vary for a lot of people. I personally really enjoy podcasts. I find they work very well with driving to work or when I'm walking around town. I like to have something in my ears. And there are many, many, many podcasts that I really enjoy. Some of the ones that I like, The Rest is Politics, the British podcast with Rory Stewart and Alistair Campbell, Into Africa, run by the CSIS, Political Fix, which is the British politics podcast from the FT, Checks and Balance, which is the Economist's US politics podcast, Unhedged, which is the FT's economics podcast, The Rackham Review is its FT's foreign policy podcast, Money Talks is an economics podcast, The Fin is mostly Australian economics, the LRB podcast is quite ranging. It's sort of the big articles that have been in the London Review of Books. Past, Present, Future is sort of about an ideas podcast, which I think is really good. I think it's quite useful to learn about the ways that philosophers have thought about the world throughout history. Blowback is a history podcast. Acquired is a podcast about companies. Go look at these online, and there's obviously lots and lots of discussion about them. And those are often really good ways to integrate knowledge into your daily life. If you're someone that likes reading more, but you don't want to read big news articles, you could just develop quite a good Twitter algorithm that gives you things you like, or you could get into Substack. There are a lot of very good Substacks like Astral Codex 10, which is about AI. Financial Times run the Alphaville, which is their sort of hedge fund people magazine about kind of nerdy finance stuff. Most Favored Nation or No Opinion. There's a number about courts like Court Watch, Silver Bulletin, similar vein, Slow Boring, or This Week in Africa, are kind of all similar vibes, as you can imagine. Go give these ones a Google, see if any of them really flow. And lastly, I guess you can't get away from a video without talking about AI. I think you can also develop a workflow to incorporate AI into your research. I know many, many debaters that use AI to generate preliminary summaries on an issue so they can then figure out where to research. I kind of do the inverse. I have an AI set up such that I can input the text of an article that I like that is free to access. Be careful because some places won't allow you to scrape their articles. So you got to make sure you are kind of within the terms of service of the website. But if you're in the terms of the website, I upload the text of the article, and I get a much shorter, simplified version that allows me to kind of get the things I need out of it if I don't have time to read the whole thing. Obviously, there's beauty in reading the whole thing, but I think it is worth considering the ways that your workflow might be improved by AI. The last thing I'd say is that books are a beautiful thing, and I think many debaters will say that the best knowledge they've understood of something comes from a book, whether that be nonfiction but also fiction. I think many of my best ways of giving arguments about other people come from books I've read that really sensitively explain how other people have lived their lives, that give you an insight into a way that other people's worlds and existences are very different to yours. So consider reading those as well. Hopefully this all made sense. And as I said at the start, this isn't intended to be scary. I don't think there is an expectation that you need to know lots of things about the whole world or about every sector. But I think it should be seen as something that is kind of a fun opportunity in university debating. So I hope this helped. And please come say hi if you see me at Easters. I'm very excited to see you all there. Thank you.